Hi everyone, it's Ziggy and I again. We are here to read you chapter 26 of Tom's Midnight Garden. Ziggy's comfortable, hope you are. Let's read. So I'm in a very funny position because otherwise you can't see Ziggy. So I'm sort of scrooched down, but I thought you might like to see him while we're reading. Sometimes before in his life, Tom had gone to sleep in disappointment or sadness, but always he had woken up to a new day and a new hope. This time he found that the morning was only a continuation of the night and the day before. Even as his mind stirred awake, the horror and grief of yesterday were already there. This was Saturday. He had lost his chance. He had lost the garden. Today he went home. The tears fell from his eyes and he could not stop them falling. Aunt Gwen came to him early and put her arm round him. "But Tom, tell me what's the matter?" Now at last he wanted to tell her, to share and perhaps thereby lessen his grief. But now it was too late. His story was too long and too fantastic for belief. He gazed at her in silence and wept. Tom had breakfast in bed like an invalid. Over their own breakfast, the Kitsons discussed him. "He really can't make that long train journey alone and in this state," said Aunt Gwen. "Couldn't we drive him home by car?" Alan Kitson was perfectly willing. He worked on Saturday morning, so that they could not start until the afternoon. A telegram was sent to the Longs. Tom got up and dressed very soon after his breakfast, because lying in bed and thinking was worse than being up could possibly be. He came out into the little hall just as his uncle was going off to work. His uncle and aunt told him of the change of plan, and Tom nodded. Uncle Alan said good-bye and went out the front door. Sorry, I've lost my place because I was stroking Ziggy. And Aunt Gwen shut it after him. Almost immediately, however, she and Tom heard his voice in conversation outside, and in a few minutes he was back again, looking annoyed. "It's that old woman," he said. "Why can't she let well alone? Mrs. Bartholomew, what does she want now? An apology for the disturbance last night. Of course, I gave her one at the time, and I apologised again just now, but she says the boy himself must go to her." "I shouldn't dream of sending him," cried Aunt Gwen. "It's outrageous of her to expect it. I shall tell her so." Fully roused against Mrs. Bartholomew, Tom's aunt made a move to the front door. Her husband stopped her. "Careful, Gwen. She's the landlady. If we upset her, she could be very awkward." "All the same, I'll try to soothe her myself," said Uncle Alan. "No," said Tom suddenly in a dull, steady voice. "I'll go to her. I ought to. I don't mind." "I shan't let you, Tom," cried Aunt Gwen. "I shall go," he repeated. It was like getting up instead of staying in bed, crying. You had to do these things, even unpleasant things. In a strange way, there was a relief in doing them. There was something in Tom's manner that made his aunt and uncle respect his decision. A little later that morning, Tom climbed up to Mrs. Bartholomew's flat and rang the front doorbell. Mrs. Bartholomew opened the door and was face to face with him. She was, as he had expected her to be, old and small and wrinkled, with white hair. All that he had not been prepared for were her eyes. They were black, and their blackness disturbed him. That, and the way that she looked at him. "Yes," she said. "I've come to say I'm sorry," Tom began. She interrupted him. "Your name's Tom, isn't it? Your uncle mentioned it. What is your other name?" "Long," said Tom. "I've come to apologise." Tom Long. She stretched out a hand and touched his arm with the tips of her fingers, pressing with them so that she might feel the fabric of his shirt, and the flesh under the fabric, and the bone beneath the flesh. "You're real, a real flesh and blood boy, the Kitson's nephew, and in the middle of the night." Tom, trying not to be frightened by a queer old woman, said, "I'm sorry about last night." "You screamed out in the middle of the night. You woke me. I said I'm sorry." "You called out," she insisted. "You called a name." She lowered her voice. It sounded gentle, happy, loving. Tom could not say all the things it sounded, that he had never imagined for Mrs. Bartholomew. "Oh, Tom," she was saying. Don't you understand? You called me. I'm Hattie." The words of the little woman were meaningless to Tom. Only her black eyes compelled him. He allowed her to draw him inside her front door, murmuring to him softly and delightedly. He was in the tiny hall of her flat, and facing him was a Gothic barometer of familiar appearance. "That's the barometer from the Melbourne's Hall," said Tom, as if in a dream. She was pushing him ahead of her into the sitting room, and facing him from over the mantelpiece was a large brown portrait of a young man with one of those ordinary faces that you yet remember and recognise again. Tom recognised this face. He had seen it last by moonlight. "That's young Barty," he said. "Yes," said Mrs. Bartholomew. "A likeness taken soon after we were married." With difficulty Tom's mind took in the meaning of what had been said. Young Barty and the late Mr. Bartholomew were one and the same. He sat down heavily upon a chair and faced her. "You married young Barty? Who were you?" "I've been telling you, Tom," said Mrs. Bartholomew patiently. "I'm Hattie." "But Hattie was a girl when Queen Victoria reigned." "I'm a Victorian," said Mrs. Bartholomew. "What's odd about that?" "But Queen Victoria came to the throne in 1837. "That was a long time before I was born," said Mrs. Bartholomew. "I was born towards the end of the Queen's reign. She was an old lady when I was a girl. I am a late Victorian." "But I don't understand," said Tom. "I don't understand. The garden gone, and yet the barometer here, and you say you were Hattie. What happened after the day I skated to Ely with Hattie, the last time we saw each other?" "The last time?" said Mrs. Bartholomew. "But no, Tom, that wasn't the last time I saw you. Have you forgotten?" She looked at him earnestly. "I see you don't know all of our story, Tom. I must tell you." Tom listened as she began her tale, but at first he listened less to what she was saying than to the way she was saying it. He studied closely her appearance and her movements. Her bright black eyes were certainly like Hattie's, and now he began to notice again and again a gesture, a tone of the voice, a way of laughing that reminded him of the little girl in the garden. Quite early in Mrs. Bartholomew's story, Tom suddenly leaned forward and whispered, "You were Hattie. You are Hattie. You're really Hattie." She only interrupted what she was saying to smile at him and nod. Isn't that magic? Right, see you next time.